Howdy folks. On a beautiful property today in the Penrose area in the Southern Highlands. Penrose is a locality, a suburb sort of near, or a town if you like, a small town near Wingelow, Bundanoon, Exeter, sort of on the inland road between Mittagong and Goulburn. Beautiful part of the Southern Highlands. And today we've had a really great day. We've just come and done some volunteer tree planting with a land care group on a private property. We've just planted a whole heap of trees. Just having a lunch break now, but that's been a really cool thing to do. It's not something I do very often, but it's been fantastic just to work with a bunch of people. But as you do, I took time out to make another video. I've just come into a woodland patch, a bit of a fragmented woodland patch on the property. And here in Penrose, we can get these sort of sandy loam soils, and probably if you go deeper down, have a bit more clay content. But today we've been planting on sort of sandy loam. But Penrose is known for this sort of sandy sclerophyll vegetation, but it also gets some swamps. And over here, I've just got a bit of a swampy area where there's a lot of fern in the ground layer, and sort of tea trees, Leptospermum species that are sort of indicative of swampy. So you just get these little sort of swampy depressions, but here it's a nice grassy Lamandra ground layer. And we've got trees like Eucalyptus piperita, that's here. It's here in the Southern Highlands, and where you get piperita in the Southern Highlands, people think it could be a different species, but it's piperita for now. And we've also got radiata, Eucalyptus radiata. I really want to make a video on that too. But what you get commonly in this part of Penrose and the Southern Highlands generally is what we call brittle gum, or some people might call manna gum, because it's got the name Eucalyptus mannifera, which sort of means manna bearing. And this is one just here. I'm not overly confident, you could say, with Eucalyptus mannifera. I don't know its sort of features as well as I would like. But once you get to know them, they're not too hard to pick up. They've got these very white trunks. They're a gum. They can have this sort of fibrous bark on them, which you can pull off in these sort of strips, I guess. These really thin sort of strips. So they can throw you a little bit when they're in the bark shedding stage, but you're just getting this sort of outer skin coming off. And then you've got these beautiful smooth white trunks, and sometimes they can be really white, just depending on where you are. Where I know mannifera from is like places like Canberra, especially the ACT, Bathurst, up on the Rocky Hills. You get a lot of mannifera, and the trunks can be really, really white sometimes. Sometimes you got to check when they're growing in amongst scribbly gums. You got to check which is which. Can get a bit tricky. But one thing about mannifera is, and I'm just going to get my hand and I'm just going to rub it up and down, and I don't know if you can see through the phone any sort of changes, but when you rub it, you get this white powder on your hands. Sometimes it can take a while to get it, but my hand's getting covered in this white powder, or this white resin, and this is sort of where mannifera comes from. If I just give that a rub, and a lot of people will do this to sort of check it against a scribbly gum if they think they've got a scribbly gum. But you can see that white powder coming off in my hands there. And that's Eucalyptus mannifera. That's the first sort of lazy ID feature. It's not the only gum that can throw sort of white resin on the trunks, but it's definitely one that does, and I always use it as just a bit of a confidence booster if you think you got this species. Eucalyptus mannifera, it's a New South Wales and Victorian tree. It's sort of a coastal hinterland, tablelands and maybe western slopes tree for New South Wales. It sort of goes as far north as about Mudgee, and then it will punch through areas like Bathurst, Orange perhaps, and it just goes straight south, sort of coming to near the south coast in some areas, and then it punches down into Victoria, where it sort of goes through the east of the state, or the northeast of the state, and it punches on there to about Melbourne. And that's the natural distribution. So it's just a New South Wales Victorian tree. And like I said, you can find it on rocky hillsides. You can find it in some other just sort of central tablelands, woodlands. And in the southern highlands here, it tends to grow in swampy areas or sort of soils with a bit of impeded drainage. And I think what this one is here, it's probably what's called mannifera subspecies gallicii. I'm not sort of worrying too much about subspecies as I go through these eucalypts. I'm just not getting into that subspecies level yet. But this one is probably subspecies gallicii and not subspecies mannifera. It's a lot more common around here, and it will grow in the sort of swampy areas in the highlands. So mannifera subspecies gallicii is known to grow in the swampy areas. I've just got some material here. The buds are in sevens. They are in concrete sevens. And I might even struggle here to get some intact clusters. You can see, I've only got 6 here, but that'll sort of probably demonstrate it. They are in sevens, but I've got a cluster of 6 there, and that's pretty typical of what they look like. Subspecies gallicii is in the New South Wales flora key, is stated as having acute buds. It's got an acute tip on the buds, so I might be right here with the appearance and the look of the buds. But if I could get a cluster of 7, that would be helpful. But there they are there. I know they're a bit past their best. So you should get mannifera with clusters of 7. And they don't tend to differentiate from that. I've got some here that are a bit less mature. And even again, I'm getting clusters of 6. I'm getting clusters of 6. Look at this. I got this the other day with one of the eucalypts I was looking at. Might have been Terraticornis or what was it? Maybe Obstins. Yeah, look, they're all in 6. But they're meant to be in 7s. Just can't get a 7 cluster. But that's what they look like in sort of the more immature phase, I would say. But that's a pretty good indicator for mannifera. Got a peduncle there, maybe 10 to 15 mil. You can see they're solitary in the leaf axils. Cannot find one with 7, isn't that amazing? You can see the leaves, which we should have covered first, I know. The leaves, they're a little bit bluey green. They're really on the bluey green side. And from a distance, they are very bluey green and you can sort of pick them from a distance sometimes. They tend to have a bit of a weeping habit. Just a general weeping habit. A lot of these branches are coming down to ground level. This tree's growing completely sideways, but you can sort of see the branches sort of weeping over, and that's sort of a typical feature for mannifera. If I look at these leaves, they tend to be on the narrow side. When you look at the canopy, mannifera tends to be narrow. So that's another giveaway for it. You get a lot of big trees with very narrow foliage, and just depending where you are in this part of the world, for me, you're going to think it's either a scribbly gum or manna gum or brittle gum. Something like Rossii or something like mannifera when you see them from a distance. So yeah, good dash of blue-green in the foliage. The foliage is sort of thin It doesn't feel very thick. It's on the thin side. And it's sort of got a bit of a texture to it. What I'd describe as, it's sort of rubbery, if I can give it that. It's very smooth. There's no hint of any sort of roughness in it. It's very smooth, and as I rub it through my hands, I'm reminded of sort of rubber gloves. That's what it sort of feels like. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's what it feels like. Sort of a rubber glove texture. If I give it a smell, yeah, I find mannifera doesn't have a lot of scent. It's sort of one of those ones that I don't really bother smelling all that much. But if I smell it, yeah, there's not a lot of scent there. I can't get much at all out of that. Might have to crush it up a little bit more. Yeah, maybe there's a bit of a geranium smell there, or a bit of a, it's not very eucalyptus-y and it's not very strong. But not getting much there at all, but it does have that nice sort of smooth rubbery texture. Leaves are concolorous. They're completely concolorous, and even these ones are adult. You can see they're not overly fat. They're sort of getting, you know, up to probably 2 centimetres or less. That's what I typically see for mannifera. 2 centimetres or more or less wide. They're concolorous. And the leaves aren't even overly long. They're probably sort of, on average on this tree anyway, they're sort of getting up to 10 centimetres or so. So just one of these trees that has short, narrow leaves on average. They're not overly long. I can hardly see a leaf here that's over 10 centimetres. And this is a well and truly adult branch. So leaves are a bit on the short side. One thing that helps with mannifera differentiate it from some other similar looking gums within its range, maybe gums like Eucalyptus rubida and snow gum, and gums like scribbly gum, Rossii, is the juvenile foliage. The juvenile foliage is narrow as well. So you get these sprays of narrow leaves, and that's another thing that increases my confidence that it's mannifera. The juveniles are very narrow. The juveniles of rubida are incredibly different. And the juveniles of scribbly gum, they're normally a bit fatter. And if you've got sclerophylla at least, or what we used to call sclerophylla, they're very fat. Very fat leaves. So these juveniles, that's a spray of juveniles. And look at these juveniles here. They're very narrow. You might throw in for consideration something like Eucalyptus viminalis, but Eucalyptus viminalis don't really look like this. They're normally in opposite pairs for a long time, or when I say a long time, a good length of the stem. They're in those nice opposite pairs. These, you can see they're bluey green on the narrow side, so that helps for mannifera as well, just that narrow foliage. Sometimes the juvenile leaves have a good smell. I'm just going to smell these ones. But I'm not getting much there either. Just not getting much in the smell. It doesn't smell like much at all, really. Yeah, so can't really report much on the smell. I'm just going to finish off with the fruit. I don't find them very distinctive, apart from they pretty much always look like that. So they're in, again, I'm trying to get a cluster of 7, but I just can't. But you can sort of get the idea that that's what they're going to go up to. So they are in 7s. This one's got 5. That's the typical shape. It's sort of a bit of a sort of fattening out there at the top. They might describe it as piriform or maybe obovoid or something like that. It's not really cup shaped. It's sort of taller than it is wide, but you can see it's sort of a bit trapezoidal. They've got 3 valves. I don't know if they always have 3 valves, but I see them with 3 valves quite a lot. That's what I normally get for mannifera. 3 valves. They might have 4 on occasion, but you can see the 3 valves there. And like I said, clusters of 7 very commonly. There's some differences in the juvenile leaves and the shape of the buds between subspecies Gallicii in New South Wales and subspecies mannifera. But I think in this part of the world, in this swampy, sort of near the swampy Penrose country and around, I think it would be subspecies Gallicii. Straight mannifera, subspecies mannifera, it has a very white trunk. They can have almost ghost scum looking trunks. And I've never seen ghost scum in the wild, but mannifera can have a really, really white trunk. I think this would be good for subspecies Gallicii. So, that's all the features for Eucalyptus mannifera. If you're on the tablelands of New South Wales, you sort of got to start looking out for it. And sometimes you don't have to go too far inland to pick it up. Just showing the buds again. There's what we call immature fruit. So they're just coming on at the immature stage there. Sometimes things like that can be confusing. But as far as I can see, I didn't quite get a cluster of 7 in the buds. But that's the buds sort of in formation. And you should get 7 pretty consistently. In this case, 6, once you start getting your eye in for it. But that's Eucalyptus mannifera growing here with Eucalyptus radiata and Eucalyptus piperita. If I just zoom in from here, and I won't do it justice, but that is a big mannifera. That is a huge mannifera there where the people are congregating in the paddock. They get up to about 20 metres tall. They don't get much bigger than that. 20 metres is about the size. That one down there, yeah, it's probably pushing 20. But it's a nice, you can see it's a nice big old tree. If you rub your hands on the trunk, you might get some resin. Otherwise, you just try and find the fertile parts and look at the juvenile foliage and maybe check the records as well to know that you've got the right species. I've got a bit more fertility just on these bits here, on the edge of the branches. So, you know, towards the end of these drooping branches is the best place to look for fertile material. You can get rhubarb around these parts, and you can get snow gum as well. And I'll have to make a video on those one day. But that's a nice Eucalyptus mannifera. Nice tree to get familiar with, especially if you work in the central and southern tablelands of New South Wales. If you're working around the ACT, you're gonna, or within the ACT and Canberra, you're gonna come across it quite readily. Alrighty.